Okay, we are live. Welcome back to the Hill of Roses, where we come once again to celebrate the best contributors to our independent policy movement for progress to bring power to people like you. With us today on the program, we're going to be talking with Mia Mason. She's a congressional candidate from Maryland's 1st Congressional District. So we look forward to talking with her today about a variety of issues that are important to her campaign, getting to know her, her political strategy, and then, keeping some updates on some of the races that are currently going around the country as of today. So we're keeping our eyes out for more than just one congressional candidate today. It's going to be a wide gamut, and we have a lot to talk about. Let's start getting into it.
I can't hear you.
Oh, Mia, how are you doing today? It's a pleasure to get to know you. We had a little bit of a technical snafu there. It's a pleasure to get to know you. How have you been today?
I've been doing good. I've been super busy. It's getting a lot more busier as our entire election environment is changing daily now. So we're having to reschedule and revamp everything. It's kind of getting boring, but gosh, I wish it would just stay on track. But we know November 3rd is coming and we are ready for it.
So I have to ask, can you key people in onto where you are in the race right now? We've had a lot of people going through the primaries. I think there's a lot of people out there looking at the primaries right now, but Maryland was in the past. You're in the general right now. Who are you going up against in the fall?
I'm going up against, Mr. Republican Safe. He doesn't know what's coming for him. But, with voter turnout, we're hoping to take his seat. 50-50, 100 votes, 1,000 votes. We're going to hopefully win this. And we're running against Representative Andy Harris. And to let you know where we are in Maryland, we're the only red district in Maryland. So that's 1 out of 8. And our district is gerrymandered to make sure that Mr. Harris can stay in office. And it goes from Tawnytown to Elkton to Ocean City. And honestly, it's the size of 2 Delawares with about 3,000 miles of shoreline, both on the Atlantic and the Chesapeake Bay. So we have a lot to protect, and he votes against it all.
So I have to ask, running in this Republican area, when I looked at it, it's been kind of a seesaw type of district. It's been in Republican hands sometimes, Democratic hands another. It's been flipping a lot. What have you been trying to do to be able to flip it back to Democrat again? How have you been trying to reach out? Has it been turning out the base more, or has it been trying to have some conversations with some of those conservative folks out there?
And you're right. We're having the conversations with everyone to make sure that they show up, mainly just because we want to make sure that they complete the census that's been pushed back. And that's really what's going to change our district, to remap it, to make it all blue for Maryland. And if it stays red, it's just to make sure that we keep Representative Harris in office, but he has term limits that he believes in. So we're going to make sure that we run again to make sure Maryland does become all blue. And I'm happy to be a part of that.
So I have to ask, what have been some of those key issues you've been talking about to try and win over some of those voters? Where have you been finding this consensus in your district? Because I think there's certain goals that have certainly been very progressive causes, but in this swing district, I'm really curious, what has been on the voters' minds? What have they been coming to you the most concerned about?
Well, the biggest concerns that normally come about are our business owners with their employees and their health care. There is no business, there is no jobs. And secondly, because we have kids going back to school, we have a lot of other healthcare issues going on, and the pandemic. Healthcare is the biggest option. We've got to provide a better resource. We got the ACA. Let's build upon it. Let's give them Medicare for all. And then the last thing is our farmers out here. With the tariffs and with the slow economy, we need to help them, and that's the bottom line. We're trying to bail out the post office, and we need to make sure that we bail out the farmers. But we have Representative Harris who sees that it's in the same bill, and he votes against everyone, and that has to change. We're trying to help everyone from the lowest levels to the highest levels.
So I'd love to focus on, as you said, kind of these really present moment issues, not like trying to think into the future. It's kind of these key issues that have been on every voter's mind out there. This whole crisis of both healthcare and the economy mixed in as well with some of the civil unrest from like the George Floyd incident around police handling of both, Black and brown communities, as well as just their general violence. I'd love to talk to you about how you feel representation has done in this crisis. Do you think Congress has been doing a good job at handling these crises? What's your general sentiment about the state of affairs?
Congress has done an excellent job. They've presented the bills called the CARES Act. They've presented the bill called the HEROES Act. And we passed them. We got them through. We lobbied for them. We made sure that our communities were taken care of, the ones in need. And then when we went to the Republicans' tables and we said, hey, what do you want? What do you need to make sure that this gets passed? They undercut us. They got greedy. They put other things in there to cut us out of our small business owners, our LLCs, our contractors that are out there that are now hurting, our farmers that are hurting. And then, of course, our healthcare workers, which aren't getting the additional pay that they should be getting. And now, when it comes to the HEROES Act, they're saying they have their own. And it's not even beneficial to anybody when it's just a defense bill. It's an attaboy to the defense bill. And it's not going to help us. It's not going to help our postal workers either.
So, you have a general positive sentiment to it. I'd love to talk to you about, like, there's been this kind of balance that's been tried to struck for progressives about, like, obviously when you're in Washington, D.C., not everyone's going to be progressive out there. And there's going to be some bills that satisfy some of those more corporate wings of the Republican parties. How do you feel about the balance of giving, $4.5 trillion to these larger corporations compared to the $200 billion that went out to the people? Like, how would you have wanted to structure that first bill to try and help people's needs? What did you think it was the first thing that we had to address to have saved potentially more lives, both economically and medically?
Well, for the corporations, they should have been able to qualify for what they were doing for the PPP loans and, show what they were actually going to do with that money. For the small business owners, now what I just said is being told to them to prove what you're going to do with this money. And then what they did is they said, oh, we're going to cap it out. That needs to kind of get changed because, when we said we were going to make sure that you got 150,000 or 100,000 or 50,000, now it's just 10,000. And sometimes it's not even $1,000 to help our small business owners. And now that money's still sitting there and it can't be used unless, you got everything in order or you're a certain type of business, and that's not helping anyone. And that's why so many people have been laid off by text message, laid off by email, and then, either came to their business and found that it was boarded up and gone.
So in your opinion, obviously there could have been some better improvements on the PPP, but do you think the best place to be putting the stimulus is towards those businesses to try and help them stay afloat? Do you support the idea of these direct stimulus checks that have been going out to people as well? What would you have prioritized?
I support both. The stimulus checks were definitely helpful, especially for those low-income families and for others who relied on it with their children who then had to pay an additional $400 to $600 in childcare that was being price gouged because, they had to worry about COVID, and I understand. But when it comes to taking care of one child and the price goes from $400 per week to $600 per week, they know what you're getting in your stimulus check, and they're just trying to take it. And as a small business owner with other small businesses owners, that's kind of the wrong answer. And we need to make sure that continues. And the President Trump gave us an executive order for $400. Well, that's barely enough to cover some child care services. And sadly, a lot of child care services also went out of business during this pandemic too.
Yeah, that's certainly true. And I think people have been tasked with even more childcare responsibilities, as we were talking about before, about the whole idea of schools. A lot of people have been having to take that responsibility of keeping their kids at home. I'd love to hear your opinion about, recurring payments, universal basic income, perhaps. It's a big initiative that we have here at the channel. And I think this has been one of the things that I think has really been good for childcare. You can afford those services. Are you willing to consider something like that as something beyond these crises?
Well, I took a look at Bernie's plan, I took a look at Andrew Yang's plan, and then I ran across a great mayor who basically had a strong approach about UBI out in California, where it was basically like a rider on the SSI. And it was to help out the family to be a month per month service. You know, an extra $400 to $600 or $700 a month really helps you. You know, I'm a disabled veteran. I live on like $1,300 a month. Okay, that's not a job. Okay, it's not a paycheck. It's not anything else. You know, I would like to make sure that, you know, Social Security income is no longer taxable, but, you know, I don't even want to see my income get taxed, because then it's horrible to see, you know, your money just disappear before you even get a check. And even an employee who is now going to be able to qualify for universal basic income, imagine making sure that every month you got $500 coming in to support you. Okay, that's not a cell phone bill, that's not a car bill, that is groceries into your home. And that is making sure that if you have kids, that those groceries go to their plates so that they go to school with their brown bag and their lunch, or it goes to the school to make sure that the lunch is paid for. You know, that UBI is important. And it's even more important if we make sure that it's something that our farmers can have. You know, let's make sure that they at least get $1,000 a month, because guess what? When it's a drought or a recession, maybe we don't need to bail them out. We just need to make sure that they are still able to make their payments for their home, make sure that they make their payments for their taxes for their land. You know, these are the things that, you know, universal basic income will be able to provide in the future. And it's not socialism, it's not super progressive, it's an actual viable ideal to pass along to the next generation. Because if they're going to continue to cut Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security, we need to be able to make sure that we can put something in place to make sure that the next generation has something to earn and live off of. Because yes, you can qualify for UBI, but, you know, if you're working a full-time job and you go over a threshold, maybe you don't need it. And that's what I like about a lot of their plans. And I would be able to work with other representatives and senators and those across the aisle to get this accomplished. And we can get it done in the next decade or less.
So I'm greatly appreciative that you're supportive of universal basic income, but I wanted to focus on that one detail that you brought up, clarifying the Stockton model compared to some that you had mentioned from Bernie Sanders and Andrew Yang. You seem to have favored the more means-tested approach. Certain people over a certain income level should not be receiving it. Why do you prefer that means-tested approach compared to a more universal model?
Well, you can be a business owner and make millions, and you can be taxed at the millions of brackets. But the thing is, you know, you can create a franchise and teach others how to do that. And that needs to be the mindset of our business owners, okay? So that your business can live on without you. And it can live on with other people who have the same skill sets that you can teach them. So getting them to basically have a job apprenticeship program to make sure that your business succeeds past your generation is something that we desperately need in America to bring our manufacturers back to America. And that's one sad thing. I do agree with the president about China and other things, but that's just because we need to make sure that we promote new technologies and smaller manufacturing processes here in America.
Yeah, no, I mean, I wholeheartedly agree with you on those programs, but I wanted to go kind of focus in on that question of like the idea of the balance between a universality model where everyone gets the same benefit versus a means tested model where you say this benefit is exclusively for people making between this range of income. Do you have a reason why you prefer that more means tested model as they have out in Stockton, California?
Well, I grew up in the military. And I had to basically choose between work or joining the military. And it's just like a choice between either starting a business or having that income every time, you know. And just to bracket it off at a certain, like, you know, $500,000, $250,000 or $100,000 you make per year, you know, when it cuts off UBI, you know, It can always be different for a different area that you live on. I was in the military and we had what was called COLA. So if we think about UBI, we can just call it COLA, so that it helps us with, the inflation that we're still facing with now because our wages haven't caught up to that. So yes, UBI can be completely universal, but the way I bring it to be a means is to make sure that you are actually using it and it is helping you, so that you can actually succeed in your life. And for those who have a disability or anything else, we want to make sure that it's guaranteed to you.
Okay, so I kind of understand where you're going with there. So, I wanted to focus now on kind of the tactical side. There's been a lot of ideas that have been discussed today, but you know what? That's not all of politics. It's a lot about what's the strategy for how change happens. And so I'd love to hear, Mia, in your opinion, like, what is that leadership style that you've been striving for both on the campaign trail and what you hope to bring to Washington, D.C. to actually accomplish the agenda you're running on?
Well, the biggest agenda and the biggest thing that has changed is listening to people's story. And part of that is making sure that it's brought to the House floor so that it is shared and heard. Normally we only have 2 to 5 minutes to be able to speak, but we should be able to make sure that it represents our communities of what they're going through and what they're facing with, besides making sure some award or memorial is done as well. But what we are struggling with at this day and age and how we are going to change it and what they suggest as their ideas to help us get there. Because you know what? Many more heads are better than just one. And this is why, as a representative, we get to have 500 to 700 to almost 1 million people saying, yes, this is the way we want it done. Get it done.
Yeah, I certainly agree with you. It's good to bring the community with you. How would you try to establish that rapport with the community? Would it be regular reporting out to them, town halls? How would you try to hear them and them hear you?
Well, just like we are here tonight, we're now in a new virtual world. We couldn't do this back in the 80s or 90s unless you were with Tom
Certainly an
Brokaw.
advantage now, yeah.
But other folks are still relying on the telephone, and calling them daily is a passion, and to make sure that they're informed. And then, of course, if we have the opportunity to go back out with a mask on and people feel safe, I will be back out at their doors saying hi. And we have a lot of volunteers now. So they're willing to do the same once things get into phase 3 here in Maryland, whenever that comes. But right now, we're just making sure that we follow the CDC guidelines. We do things virtually, and like everyone else, we're staying safe.
Yeah, I'd love to ask you, what has been the most effective method so far while you've been campaigning in these COVID times? I think a lot of people have been trying to figure out how to have campaigns been adapting when you can't actually have that face-to-face time as often. What has been the go-to thing that you've been trying to take all that support that you've been garnering in your campaign and direct them towards doing?
Oh, well, making sure that I find their passion, find out what they want to do. If they want to do texting, calling, emailing, doing the things that I can't do while I'm on the road, going to someone else's home to make them help me in my campaign. Those are the things that, are done behind the scenes to help us succeed. The best way I can say it is that they almost have the same passion I do. They want to see Representative Harris gone. They don't hate the man, but they understand what he's done against our communities, and they want to get rid of him. And they're willing to stand up, no matter how progressive I am, to make sure that, we see this change this November, not back in 2018 or 16 or 14 or 12 or 10 or 8, because he basically bought himself into this seat. And now he's going to be retiring soon. And we need to make sure for the next decade, we keep Maryland all blue.
I certainly agree with you there. One thing I would love to ask you is, one of the things that we've also seen in this race is you're trying to bring a new form of representation in terms of diversity as well. Being a transgender individual, I'd love to ask you, how have you been trying to use that during the campaign? Have you been trying to say, look at me like everyone else, or have you been trying to be an active champion for the campaign and make it a highlight focus of your campaign?
Well, I don't even really bring that up. I ran against two other natural women, and then, if you can read my website, you understand that it's there. I went up against President Trump at the Women's March because he was trying to kick us out of the military again, and I was against it. But the thing is, I am a woman. It is legally that way, and we are together in a community. So you can look past that, and you're a guy. Unless you tell me your pronouns or something else. Other than that, then I accept that. I accept you. And that's why we are running to restore the equity and equality throughout our communities, because this president and Harris have attacked it since day one they were in office. They're not concerned about any of us. They want us to pay more for everything. They want us to make sure that our employers can treat us like property and other things to get their way with us. And we have to stand up and say no to them. Even though he says no to us, it is finally time for us to say yes on the ballot box to Mia and change this representation.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree. And I'm glad that you are taking that approach of it should be treated like everyone else, because it is a completely normal thing. I'd love to ask you, in highlighting the issues of that community, though, what are some of the things that would be helping those of the transgender community? It's something we don't get to talk about a lot on the program, so I'd love to hear from your perspective what we could be doing to be able to help them out.
Well, the best thing to do that we can do is be an ally of everyone. If it's Black trans lives, if it's just trans lives, if it's a minority of the Asia Pacific community or African American community or the Chinese that are here legally. It is about making sure that if they're a part of the LGBT community, we don't discriminate against them. Just like if you saw somebody wearing golf clothes and came out of a Marilyn Manson concert like I have before, you don't judge. You don't need to do that. And if you have faith, you understand what happens. It's called karma for a reason. So accept us, provide us the equality, and we will make sure that us as representatives will restore the equity and equality when we pass the ERA in the future.
I certainly agree with you there. So, the last thing I'd love to focus on before we hear from our audience for a little bit is, in your opinion, what is the overall direction the kind of progressive movement needs to be going on to win over more voters? What do you think is something that generally the movement has been doing a little bit shortcoming so far that we can start improving upon?
I don't think it's been that much of what we need to change to make ourselves more centralist or more Republican. I think it's more of about bringing that mindset of this new generation that is also following us, that may be even more progressive than we are. So, it's not, what the president or others say is radical or, nasty women. We are simply going through the same problems we had 100 years ago when we couldn't vote. And this is why we wear purple today for the 100 years that we finally now have that equality to make sure that we do and are able to vote. And prior to that, we didn't even have a constitution. So it's been a long time in the making, and we still have a long time in our future to make sure that it continues to succeed. And we don't want to see it squandered away. So hopefully we see more people winning their elections tonight so that they can win in November.
Yeah, I do hope so. There's a lot out there that's not going to be solved by just any one race, but they add up, and each one is important to get them across the finish line. So, Mia, thank you for answering my questions. Let's go to some of the audience questions now. One that I got from Nelson, he asked me, what are your thoughts on immigration reform in general?
That's a really broad question. So we want to make sure that we actually have a valuable program that provides a pathway to citizenship. We need to make sure that if they are here illegally, that we provide them the opportunity to come forward. They don't need to hide. We know that you're here. We understand what you might be going through. You're here because of a reason. You have your family. We have the Dreamers. We have the DACA. And we need to make sure that America is still the melting pot that the Statue of Liberty was given to us for, is because we accepted immigrants. We accepted that into our country because of the wars. And we want to make sure that everyone here can do that peacefully without being detained, deported, killed, or harmed. So, for immigration reform, that is our guidelines. To make sure that other people can have the same opportunity that we had hundreds of years ago, to make sure that we had a pathway to citizenship here in America.
Yeah, I certainly agree that they should have that basic form of like respect given to them. But I'd love to hear, in your opinion, how we can improve the legal process of immigration, because, you know, the whole reason they come in here illegally is because, frankly, the legal system was too hard for them to overcome to be able to come here illegally a lot of the times. What would you be trying to do to improve that legal process?
Well, I'm not a lawyer.
Sure.
Going to be a future legislator. But I'm pretty sure the best way that they can advise me to do something is to say that, you know, when they arrive and they're seen or they apply for a job, they're notified, right? And then they know what the cost is. They know what the paperwork is. They can work with their employer and pursue a pathway to legalness and get what they need to stay here, because so many immigrants aren't paying taxes into our systems, and some are using benefits because of what has happened to them on their journey here. And we want to make sure that everyone is still protected. I understand we have a big wall, but it's not going to stop people from coming into our country, from studying abroad or hopping on a cruise ship or a plane. But you know, we know you're here. We need to be able to help you if you want to stay here.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree. I think it's important to have that compassion to try and understand that the system was broken. It's not a lot of these people's fault that they've been kind of trapped in the shadows. But once you've built that system, you know, and help guide all these people who are in the shadows, you need something that's going to be improved upon, so we don't just build up that population again who are here illegally. So I'm glad we can touch upon that. The next question that I had here from the audience is, you know, on the subject of that, I think people wanted to know, have you heard of value-added taxes? Is that something that you consider? What other forms of taxation do you think are things that we need to be doing to fund some of these proposals?
I'll be honest with you, John. I haven't spent a lot of time looking at the value-added taxes, but I understand, you know, what I understand about UEI and how to work with it. I do believe in legalization, like what has happened in Colorado and what has happened here in Maryland and DC, which has provided a lot of revenue, which can help, you know, fund these programs and other government agencies. So hopefully that will also help our farmers as well. But yes, I thank you for giving me some homework to.
So let me explain it very briefly. So it's very similar to a sales tax. However, it applies at every point during the value stream. So, you know, while a product is being developed into its final form, each intermediary step, the companies are paying a tax on that. And so, yes, it'll be finally transferred, the tax, like a sales tax, once it reaches the consumer. But for the products that they don't sell, we are now taxing those services as well. And so it can be applied across the board as a flat tax, or you could tailor it based on specific industries or products that you want to use on it.
Well, having worked in the manufacturing business and gone behind the scenes and seen what it takes to get stuff to come into the country via ship and then turn it into a product and then turn it in and talk to other vendors, we still pay taxes on everything, even at the manufacturer's level. So that definitely adds up and helps cities, helps states, helps small communities out in other rural districts outside of the state that normally logistically bring things into a city to manufacture something. So yes, I understand that, but I don't know about increasing or making sure that every little knickknack gets taxed.
Yeah, so I think one of the appeals of this, you know, something that's been embraced by like 167 nations, is that it's a consumption tax, basically, which it can be something that can be regressive, except for the fact that you can tailor the industry. So some basic essentials like groceries or maybe gasoline prices, you're not extra taxing on those things that working class and poor individuals are consuming more often. But you can hyper focus on things like potentially automation and robotics that are replacing jobs, or certain luxury goods. So That's kind of something I like. And if you have it where it's redistributing it back, I think it becomes a lot less regressive potentially in nature.
Okay, I understand.
Yeah. So I'm curious, just to expand on this question though, what are some of the forms of taxation? I know you had mentioned the whole production of marijuana being a legal thing to be able to tax. What are some other things you think we could be doing to generate revenue for some programs, like, let's take, for instance, Medicare for All? How do you think that would be best handled? Do you think it's through the payroll tax like Bernie proposed, or are there other ideas that you consider?
I do like Bernie's proposal for the payroll tax, because it also allows us to have what I like about the Medicare for All, and that's a fixed price per year. I would like to be able to make sure that we are able to include it for the entire family of all ages. And then, we don't have to worry about Part A, Part B, C, or D. We just, have the vision, have the dental. I currently have a version of that right now. It's called TRICARE for Life, or as our active duty service members do, it's called TRICARE Prime. And it really helps us. And President Trump, gosh, he was just trying to cut it.
Yeah.
Last week, and then he said he was going to protect it.
But did that with the mail too recently as well.
Yes.
What trend he's building up here.
But look, we need to make sure that it stays funded, because the Republicans want to buy jets. They don't want to provide us health care. And I remember going to the Hill and trying to explain that about me and my transition and why I should be in the military and why I earned who I am and where I am and what I've been doing and why I should be able to retire. And, this was part of my life-saving procedure to make sure that I am who I am. And it wasn't something that I just flipped on the switch one day and said, this is me. No, this was my whole life that I've been living like this, and I needed to make sure that I completed it. So the money to help our future service members has to be there, because if we can spend money on Viagra, we can spend money on other hormones and birth control. Why can't we help them? Why spend it on a jet? Why spend it on bombs that we're not using?
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree with you there on the priorities, especially coming away from the military industrial complex. So let's go with one more question from the audience before we wrap up here and let people know how they can get involved in helping your campaign if they like what they heard today. So this last question is from Want to See More. They want to understand what your general stance on gun control is in America.
Oh, well, I'm proposing to you to make sure that we have a job opportunity, a business opportunity to everyone who owns a gun. I'm a Democrat, not trying to take your gun away. I've been in the Navy, the Army, the DC National Guard, and I've worked with every weapon out there. I'm not going to support our gun manufacturers because there's so many more than what the military actually has. And of course, here's what it is. This is your land. This is your legacy. Okay, I understand that you have a weapon. I want to make sure that it is legal for you to have. And the best way that I can make sure as a representative is that it is shown on the back of your driver's license, because in many states, it's also open carry along with concealed carry. And I understand a lot of our gun owners, have to carry additional paperwork or can't even travel in some states. And they need to use the FFL in order to have a dealer transfer those weapons from one state to another. So we want to make sure that those are all descriptions provided on the driver's license at a cost, which also help our agencies understand exactly what is being handed down to your 9-year-old, your 6 years old, so that when they grow up, they're fully qualified and trained by someone who is a professional when they have their gun, and they continue it on to their next part of the family. So we're not trying to run away like Trump says and take your weapons away. We're trying to make sure that you use everything properly.
I think that's really important. I think we have this enshrined right. And so we shouldn't be preventing people who want to follow the laws from being able to obtain guns, but we should be trying to have it be a regulated process, just like we do with cars. And so I'd love to hear, in your opinion, what you think about certain ideas within the gun control realm. First, the idea of having gun insurance, basically just like what we do with cars, where you have to be insured for that, having some accident protection around guns, as a requirement. And then the second is having some incentivization to help people upgrade to biometric identification on firearms for usage. How do you feel about those two ideas that are out there in the gun control conversation?
Well, for basically the biometrics part, that's a little cumbersome. The technology can be defeated. I've seen it defeated, especially when it's just your fingerprint, and a lot of other things that I don't want to get into right here. But I completely understand the insurance part of things. It provides another business opportunity. You know, people come up and say, hey, do you have term life insurance? Do you have death insurance? Do you have flood insurance? Do you have fire insurance? Do you have car insurance? Do you have, hurricane or military or God protection? So this is just another incentive to, make sure that other small businesses can provide an additional insurance. And this will definitely be able to benefit, our pawn shops, our gun shops, our ranges out there, to make sure that, people who show up are qualified. They got their insurance. The weapon is operational so that there's no negligent discharge. So that, when we go into the future and we advance our weapons and you still have a legacy musket or a pistol or other weapon, you're not going to harm yourself or others, including the properties of these business owners.
Well, I'm glad you support that idea. I do think I would like to see more advancement in the biometric idea, but you're right, with the current ones that are just a fingerprint, that can be a little bit easy to hack.
And if it's wet and you need to be able to draw, I understand what home defense is and how to keep it safe from children as well. And we have to make sure that children just can't open it up because their fingerprints are too close to dad's or mom's.
Yeah, exactly. And, one of the things that I think is very kind of goes hand in hand with the idea of an insurance is, if you have to insure each gun, we have like this excess stockpile. We're the only nation in the world that has more guns than citizens. And so when you have something like that and you have an insurance on it, maybe we have a, voluntary gun buyback. I don't think we want to take people's guns, but we sure would maybe want less in circulation, where that's how you get some into the black market supply, where it's just like, I have to get rid of some of this gun supply. So, I'm glad we can agree that we do need to just make sure that the process is safe. We know who is getting the guns and that it's in a responsible manner and that you're showing some form of proof that you know how to properly utilize it. I think that's all we really want out there.
Yeah. For the weapons that aren't functional, you can take it back and, we're not trying to buy it back, but you know what to do with it. Properly recycle that weapon. I'm not trying to take your weapons away. I understand what you're going to do. I've gone to gun buybacks and magazine buybacks. Hey, I didn't need it. After Freddie Gray, I made a decision to turn in my weapon. I made a decision to turn in my magazines. I didn't need them.
Yeah, no, I wholeheartedly hear you there. Hopefully people will take that responsibility, because I do think it would help if we had some less in circulation. And, the person who asked us wanted to see more. They were very thankful for your answer here on the guns. With that being said, for the more people that are out there enjoying what you've had to say today, Mia, how can they be able to help you out? We have your website scrolling across the bottom of the page. How are you looking for people to be able to help you out today?
Oh, amazing. So definitely we have a volunteer link that you can sign up at, or you can come to our Facebook page by clicking on events and coming to our events. We have an event this weekend with some wonderful stars. I'm not going to try to say their names here because there's a long list of them. But basically, come to Mia D. Mason, make a donation, help us out, help us send out the mail. Let's get you representative and share the message. That's the story. That's my job, to share your message in the House floor. So let's get that done. And thank you, John, for having me here.
You're very welcome, Mia. It was a pleasure getting to know you, and I do hope everyone will visit your website at miadmason.us, as we have that across the bottom of the page. Please come back later in the fall. Let's see how you're doing later when you're in the thick of things come November, come this very contested race. This is a flippable district. As I said beforehand, this has a history of going back and forth, and I think, Mia, maybe you can help that pendulum come back to the left a little bit further.
Oh, absolutely right. And maybe after Labor Day, I'll be in my car and you'll see my actual office.
Oh, yes, that would be a lovely treat. Getting a little bit more normalcy. We all hope that for everyone out there. So, Mia, thank you so much for coming here again. We hope you have a great rest of your night.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you.
Okay, everyone, that was Mia Mason. We're really thankful for her for coming on today to be able to talk about her campaign for Maryland's 1st District. We do hope you will check out her website at miadmason.us to be able to check out seeing if you want to volunteer or be able to contribute. And we are also keeping that eye out for all the Florida races out there. You know, we at the Hill of Roses made several of an endorsement in the Florida races, looking at Adam Christensen, Richard Thripp, as well as Jen Perelman, all people who we've also had here on the program. We're wishing them the best of luck. So far, it looks like Jen's going to fall a little bit short, but still a very impressive performance against Debbie Wasserman Schultz for the huge establishment presence that she has. And Richard Thripp, as well as Adam Christensen, are looking pretty close. They're on the edge. So we're going to have to keep tuning in. So keep an eye out there. We're wishing them the best of luck. Everyone, let's finish up with a little bit of a programming wrap up. Please make sure you share these videos out there, subscribe, like, to make sure that people see these candidates that we have on, as well as we can grow the network we have here at the Hill of Roses. Furthermore, upcoming programming that we got on the program is we're going to be talking with Yana Ludwig. She's a U.S. Senate candidate from Wyoming tomorrow at 9 p.m. Eastern time. Then on Thursday, we're going to be talking with Meg Gorman out Tennessee's 3rd congressional district. So we'll be talking to her about her general election campaign. And then Friday, we're going to be off. So tune in 9 p.m. Eastern time always. Thank you all for tuning in today for this conversation with Mia Mason. And we hope you guys are staying safe out there. We hope you guys are, getting a little bit of that social vibe. Please go call someone. I know that's going to make a big benefit. It's nice to have more than just online conversations out there. So call up an old friend. It'll really boost your spirits. It did mine today. And I love you guys for tuning in. And as always, I hope you guys stay rosy out there.